Radio TV phono nut here, and what we have torn apart is an Acme-Lite dual tube fluorescent desk lamp, probably from the 1950s, I would say. I got this at a local estate sale auction for not much money. It was advertised as working, and it does indeed work, but one of the light tubes is missing, and the tube that remains is a Sylvania with the old upside down triangle Sylvania logo. So I think that would probably be an original bulb to the lamp, and that would probably also date it to the 1950s. I don't really know when they phased that logo out, but I think by the mid-60s they had pretty much gone to the more modern Sylvania GTE logo. But anyway, I moved the working bulb over to the socket that was bulbless and got nothing. And I also heard something rattling around in the bottom, so that gave me the opportunity to pull the bottom cover off to see what was rattling around, and one of these ballasts had come loose. So this apparently has one ballast for each bulb. And the way you start this is you press down on the left hand button, hold it down for a second to give the lamp time to start, and then whenever you are through with it, you press the right button, and that kills the lamp. So I opened it up and was looking around trying to figure out why the other socket wasn't working, and I found this broken wire here, and trying to figure out where it goes. It looks like it probably goes to this terminal on the switch there. This is a 6-terminal switch, 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, and that terminal right there is the only one that doesn't have anything on it. So we're gonna clean that terminal and the wire really well, and then we're gonna try to solder it back in place, and then I'll have to obtain a light tube to put in that other socket, and hopefully all will be well. Now, I was showing this lamp on a Facebook group, and people and on another group that I'm a member of, and people were telling me, "Oh, well, just convert it to LED." Well, no. If I wanted an LED desk lamp, I could just go to Walmart and buy a modern Chinesium lamp and be done with it. That'd be converting this to LED would be like taking a tube radio and ripping the guts out of it and putting a modern solid state chassis in it. As long as this works, I really don't see any reason not to keep it original. Okay, in this case, I cleaned the terminal off of the existing solder and cleaned the wire where solder would stick to it so we could tin it, and we just poked it down in that little hole there, and now we'll solder it up and hopefully it'll be good to go. Okay, we got that wire soldered back in place, so let's bundle all this mess back up in here and reattach the ballast to the bottom plate, and hopefully this will work. I'm gonna have to get some new feet put on this because the old rubber ones that were on here have cracked and crumbled, so that shouldn't be no big deal. Wire soldered back on the switch. I replaced the 4 feet that were crumbling. I had some off of a junk Crosley record player that were slightly bigger than what came off of it, and I had to use some washers in conjunction with the screws because the holes in these feet were slightly bigger than what was original, and it now works. And I switched the bulb around from one socket to the other, and both sockets work. I just need to get a replacement bulb to put in this other socket, and then it will work just like it did from the factory. Now, I think I might have failed to mention the ballast in these things, in this lamp, is made by General Electric. The bulb is a Sylvania with the black end caps and the old logo. So I'm pretty sure this lamp is probably from the 50s, might possibly be early 1960s, but I can't really see it being any newer than that. And yes, I know it's upside down, but that's what the logo on the bulb looks like. And the bulb is a little dark on the ends, but not overly dark, so it should have a good bit of life left in it. So let's take it in and plug it up and see what happens. But before we turn it on, I thought I'd give you a good look as to what it looks like. And if we turn it around here, you can see the tag on the back, Acme-Lite. But yeah, this definitely looks like something from the, like I said, 1950s or possibly early 60s. Alright, I cleaned this up a little bit as best I could. It's got some imperfections, such as some spots of surface rust and that sort of thing, but overall not too terribly bad. And for where I'm going to be using it, it doesn't have to look brand new. Of course, if we wanted to make it look that way, we could dismantle it and sand it down and repaint it, but I'm really not interested in going that far right now. Yeah, we hear the rain coming down outside. Alright, we have our desk cleaned off. Let's see if this thing will start. There we go. Works beautifully. Now, I went to Walmart over the weekend. You know, that first of the month errand running that we have to do. Well, I guess I don't have to do it, but I love to eat. And Walmart is about the only grocery store, if you want to call it that, on my end of town. And I'd rather take a beating than to go there. But like I said, I love to eat, so have to go there every now and then. Well, while I was there, I looked for an F15T8 bulb, and all I found were LED equivalents. Now, some LED tubes require modification of the lamp, and then some LED tubes are plug and play, so to speak. Well, according to what they had at Walmart, you're supposed to be able just to drop one of these in, a traditional fluorescent fixture, and it worked, but they were those Great Value brand of light bulbs, and that claimed to last, they claim to have a lifespan of 44 years, which we all know is a load of horse crap. The screw-in LED bulbs that we buy for the incandescent replacements certainly don't last as long as what the package claims. In fact, some of those I don't think last as long as the incandescent bulbs. So I just left Walmart with their LED light tubes, and I came home and got on eBay and found some new old stock Kenrad bulbs. Now, Kenrad is an old company that goes way, way, way back. I don't know when they went out of business, but they've been out of business for a good while. Now, as far as the age of this lamp, I did some research, and there's a dot pattern on the original, what I presume is the original Sylvania bulb in this fixture, that corresponds to April. It could be either 53, 63, or 73. You have to figure out the decade on your own. All they give you is the 3. But they mentioned in that article that Sylvania went from using the black Bakelite end caps to regular silver end caps in about 1955. So we're going to say the tube in this lamp was made in April of 1953, and assuming it's the original tube to the fixture, then the lamp was probably made sometime in 1953. I just wished it still had the other bulb in it. most likely what happened when the other bulb stopped illuminating. They probably figured the bulb was bad and just took it out and threw it away and replaced the bulb with another one, and then whenever it didn't light, they just took the replacement bulb out and stuck it away somewhere and just used the lamp with one bulb. And then I come along and find a broken wire and resolder it, and we're good to go. So that's about all I've got for the lamp right now until I get the other bulbs in. They should be in hopefully by the end of the week, unless UPS loses that package like they did the one back in December that my friend's mother sent me of Christmas candy and things that they claimed was delivered that never was, but wouldn't refund any money. Even though they screwed up, they wouldn't refund any money. But anyway, I won't get off on a rant about that right now. Here's a crude schematic that I drew up. Don't grade me on my artwork here, but before I get into the explanation of that, this uses a type F15T8-CW light tube. F means fluorescent, 15 is watts, T stands for tube, and 8 is the pin spacing between the terminals here, and then CW stands for cool white. Now these bulbs are available in warm white, and there's a UV bulb and a black light. They come in several different variations, but for our situation we need the cool white bulb, and that's what I would prefer. So we have three other components besides the tube itself. We have the kill switch, we have our ballast, which in this case is nothing more than an inductor, and then we have our start switch. So when the lamp is plugged in and not illuminated, our kill switch is closed. It's a normally closed push button momentary switch, and then our start switch is a normally open push button switch, and in this position there is no current flow. But I guess before we get started with that, let's look at the end of the fluorescent tubes. On one end we have two pins on our left end that connect to a filament, and then at the opposite end of the tube we have two other pins that connect to a separate filament. So when the lamp is plugged in, there's no current draw, it's an open circuit, no illumination. When I press this momentary start switch, it completes the circuit, which allows the AC to come in through our kill switch that's normally closed, and through the ballast, then down here through our filament on the right hand side, down here through our now closed start switch, through the other filament, and up here to the AC line return. What this does is it preheats the tube. Whenever I release this normally open start switch, it breaks the circuit, and then this ballast exhibits what's known as inductive kick, where it releases a momentary high voltage charge which causes the mercury in the tube to ionize, and then we have current flow through the tube. And once this happens, the purpose of our ballast is to limit the current flow through the fluorescent tube. If this ballast was not present, then the fluorescent tube would self-destruct. So now the light is on, and it will remain on until we press this normally closed kill switch, which opens the circuit, kills current flow, lamp goes out, and it will not turn back on until it's restarted. So I will hit the kill switch on here. This will break the circuit and kill the lamp. There you go. Now, I'm going to hit the start switch momentarily, and you will see the ends of the bulb glow. And there you go. Once the ends of the bulb glow, you release the switch. The ballast provides an inductive high voltage kick, and that lights the lamp. So I hope I explained that close enough. Now, as far as the type bulb this uses, I've already told you the part number, and whenever I had to run errands this weekend, I was in Walmart, which is a place I'd rather take a beating than go to, but we won't get off on a rant about that. And I was going to pick up a bulb to replace the missing one in this lamp. Well, all they had, which was really no surprise, were the drop-in LED replacements. Now, I believe some LED tubes require rewiring of the lamp in order for them to work, and then you have other LED tubes that are compatible with ballast style fixtures, so all you have to do is just plug and play, so to speak. Well, those bulbs were the Great Value brand, which is their crap house brand, and if their LED tubes are no better than the LED bulbs for the incandescent lamps, then we don't need those, because those incandescent bulbs, incandescent LED replacements, they often don't last as long as the original incandescent bulbs did. So I came home and ordered some new old stock Kenrad bulbs off of eBay. Now, I don't know when Kenrad stopped making lamps, but I know that's a brand that goes way back to the early days of lamps and vacuum tubes. So we'll just see when they get here. They should be here in a couple of days. Now, as far as the lamp that's in here, I found an article on the internet that shows how to decipher the date code on Sylvania lamps. Unfortunately, they don't give you the decade. All we can tell by the date code was this was made in April of 53, 63, or 73. But when we read further in the article, it tells us that by 1955, Sylvania had stopped making the tubes with the black Bakelite end caps and went to metal end caps. So seeing as how this one has the Bakelite end caps, we're going to say that this lamp tube was made in April 1953, and assuming that it's the original tube in the lamp, and it probably is, then the lamp, the fixture, was probably made sometime in 1953. So 70+ year old lamp and still working. Now I wished I had the other tube that went in here, but I suspect what happened is when the other tube failed to illuminate, somebody removed it and threw it away and bought a replacement tube, or maybe they didn't buy a tube at all, maybe they just used it with one tube, or they could have bought a replacement tube, stuck it in there, and then it didn't light, so they just pulled the replacement tube out and stuck it away somewhere and never to be found again. But then I get a hold of it, and I find a broken wire on the switch and resolder that, and all is well. But I think I would stand a better chance of these bulbs lasting longer if I go with the old school USA made fluorescent tubes over some Chinesium 666 drop-in LED replacement. So there you go, a circa 1953 manual preheat dual bulb fluorescent desk lamp. Should be good for many years to come. And the ballast does not make a obnoxious humming sound. In fact, I have to put my ear right up next to it to hear it. So no problems there. Switching gears a minute, here's an old school carbon composition resistor that I recently encountered with the color bands brown, green, orange, and silver, which translates to 15k ohms with a plus or minus tolerance of 10%. That means the resistor can measure anywhere between 13,500 ohms and 16,500 ohms and still be considered acceptable. Now, there were 20% resistors with no tolerance band. Those were basically used in circuits that were not critical at all. And then you had the 10% resistors, silver tolerance band, 5% resistors, gold tolerance band, and then the 2% resistors, red tolerance band, that were used in more critical applications such as test equipment, etc., etc. Believe it or not, a lot of people think that the only failure mode of a carbon composition resistor is that it goes way up in value. Well, that's not always the case. Yes, that's the most common failure mode, but we have our digital multimeter connected to this resistor via alligator clip leads, and it reads 314.5 ohms. So I would say that one has gone way down in value from where it used to be. And that reminds me of a test that we took whenever I was taking electronics at the local community college. Our instructor was originally from Germany, and he had taught there for 33 years. He taught there from 1967 until 2000. And I had him my first year, and then he retired. But he was very thorough, and you were going to know the material if you were going to get a passing grade. He wasn't the type just to hand out passing grades as party favors. But anyway, equation on a test, or more precise, a simple schematic on a test, gave us some values, and it was nothing more than a DC voltage source, a resistor, and a load. And he mentioned measuring, we'll say 12 volts on the input, but then he got nothing on the output. And he asked us to list the most probable cause for the problem. And I wrote on there that resistor R1 was open. And I got credit for the answer. Well, one of my other classmates simply wrote down bad resistor, and he didn't give him credit for that answer, and the student got a little huffy about it. And my instructor went on to tell him, yes, the resistor is bad, but how is it bad? And then he made some joke about bad is a way a misbehaving child acts and you tear their behind up. But I want to know exactly how is this resistor at fault to cause the no voltage condition on the output across the load. And the student was like, well, they go up in value. He's like, yeah, well, you should have put that. But they can also go down in value too. So for people who don't think they can go down in value, here's the proof. Now, I posted a picture of this resistor on one of the groups I'm in on Facebook, and would you believe I had people tell me that, oh, well, your meter is a piece of crap and you just need a good meter, or you need to replace the battery in your meter, or I can tell that that resistor is not connected to your meter leads, that's connected to something else. Instead of getting in a fight with people, I just deleted the post and said the heck with it, because I've learned when you encounter people like that, there is just really no need in arguing with them, because they're convinced that they're right, you're wrong, and all trying to explain anything to them is going to do is get you worked up, and there's just no need in it. But I'm not stupid. I've been doing this long enough to know when we have a component fault and when my meter is messing up. And just to show you that my meter is not messing up, let's get some other resistors and measure them and see how close they are. Here's a 270 ohm resistor, 10%. The meter says it's 341 ohms, so that one is out of tolerance, which is probably why I cut the leads off of it. I keep some of these out of tolerance resistors on hand because sometimes I need the leads off of them to add longer leads to a capacitor, etc. So I generally find a use for everything eventually, even if it's bad. Here's a modern 270 ohm film resistor, 267.8 ohms, so that's within spec. Here's a 1.5K 5% resistor reading 1.480, so that one is within spec. So I think you get the idea that my meter is not jacked up. It's just some people opening their mouth when they shouldn't be opening their mouth are jacked up. And you've got people like that out there who think they know everything and nobody else knows anything. And I've ran into a few of those types before. I remember a few years ago there was somebody in one of the Facebook groups, probably in his late 20s, and he thought he was all that and a bag of chips. And somebody mentioned me and Shango, and he was running both of us down in the dirt, claiming that we didn't have any business touching anything, that we were just a couple of hacks, and because we didn't have a shop full of lab-grade test equipment, that we just didn't need to be working on this stuff. Well, having a shop full of lab-grade test equipment is fine and dandy. It does make life easier sometimes, but ultimately the best piece of test equipment is the piece of equipment that's located at the top, up there between your ears. And if that's not functioning properly, or if that doesn't contain the knowledge that it should contain, then all of the fancy test equipment in the world is not going to do you a whole lot of good. And when I encounter somebody like that guy who acts like they know everything and that everybody else is an idiot, that's the type of person who I wouldn't let touch anything of mine. I would come near letting a first semester electronics student work on something of mine over somebody like that. And the president of our antique radio club was sort of like that. It's like my mentor told me one time. He said he's a smart man. I'll give him credit for that, but he's not as smart as he thinks he is. I remember one time me and him got into it because he was insistent that a Type 80 rectifier was just an older version of a 5U4, and I said, no, the 5U4 is heavier. It's the 5Y3 that's the later octal version of a Type 80, and he just kept insisting I was wrong, and I finally showed him in a tube manual. Here's an 80. Here's a 5Y3. The specs are basically the same except for the basing. And at that point he shut up. But he never admitted that he was wrong. I remember whenever I was taking electronics, I had a lab partner that he was a bit of a hothead. And one day my instructor was walking around the room observing, and he noticed something that this guy was doing that was incorrect. Now, he did not put the guy on public blast in front of the whole class, but he firmly but professionally let him know that what he was doing was wrong. As soon as he walked off, the guy starts getting in a huff and gathering his belongings, and he looked at me and said, I don't have to take that shit off of nobody, I'm out of here. And I tried to stop him, but he wasn't interested, and he hauled butt out of there, and that was that. And all he was doing was hurting his own self. I thought the world of that instructor. I'll tell you more about him in a minute, but he got on me several times. Did I get in a huff and walk out? No. In my mind, when an instructor gets on you for not doing something correctly, that's the sign of a caring instructor. They know that when you get out of college and are in the real world, then you're going to have to know how to perform the task at hand. Now, if this instructor didn't give a crap, he'd have let us do whatever we wanted to do, and then once we got into the real world, then we'd have been up a creek. Now, whenever I was in school, we loved those teachers who would just let you do what you wanted to do and give you a passing grade. But when we became adults, we realized they weren't really doing us any favors. Now, as far as my time in the electronics program, I wanted to get into that right after high school, but the counselors at the community college wouldn't allow it on the grounds that, you're visually impaired. You don't need to be getting into the electronics program. You need to get into the computer information systems technology program. I'm like, look, I've been doing this all my life. I know what I'm doing. I'm not going to kill myself. Well, no, you don't need to be doing that. You just don't need to go down that road. And then my mother sided with the counselors. So just to keep everybody quiet, I went into the computer program, and at first I made pretty good grades, but then the longer I was in there, the more disgusted I got, and the less interested I became. My grades suffered. I was placed on academic probation, which means they'll let you come back the next semester, but you better pull your grades up. Well, I didn't pull my grades up. They were actually worse that time than they were the last time, and then I got a nice letter from them telling me that I was on academic suspension and don't come back the next semester. You need some time to chill out. Well, I was so outdone, I told my mother, well, fine, because I'm not going back to that damn place anyway. I think I was out about 9 months, and then my mother gently approached me about going back, and I said only if they'll let me take what I want to take. So at that time she sided with me and apologized for not doing so before. I went up there, the counselor started their same BS, and I told them, look, we're not going down that road today. You're either going to sign me up for the electronics program or I'll find my way out. And after some back and forth, she finally said, well, okay, go talk to Mr. Getz. If he gives his okay, then we'll sign you up. I said, fair enough. So I went down and talked to Mr. Getz. I told him my situation about my low vision. I told him what all I was used to doing. He asked me some questions as far as can you do this and can you do that. And I basically told him where there's a will, there's a way, and we'll get it done. And he said, well, I'd love to have you in my class. So he called the counselor and said, sign him up. And then things went really well. The only thing I ever got mad at him about is he retired too early. I wished he'd have stayed on for another year so I could have my 2 years with him. Now the other instructor I had alongside him, at first me and him kind of weren't on the same page, and I think he was a bit, shall we say, apprehensive about having a visually impaired student in his class. I understand that. I understand being afraid of what you don't know. And chances are he had probably never had a visually impaired student in any of his classes. But over time, he got used to me, I got used to him, and we were on good terms. And then shortly before graduation, we were talking, and he said, I'm just going to have to confess to you, when you first entered my class, I thought you were going to be a big problem. But he said, I now realize the problem wasn't you. The problem was me. And he said, I just want to let you know what a pleasure it's been having you in my class. and what an inspiration you've been, and you can come back and visit anytime you want to. And I thanked him for the kind words. We shook hands, and that was that. Now, whenever I was in elementary and junior high and high school, I had teachers who were a little bit uneasy about having a visually impaired student in their class, and some of them told my mother that we were uneasy when we found out there was going to be a visually impaired student in our class, or in my class, but once we saw how he operated, then we wished we had a whole room full of students like him. Meaning that I did my work, I made good grades, I behaved. I didn't cause anybody any problems. But I don't have a fault with people who are uneasy about something, who are willing to learn. It's the closed-minded people who have it in their head the way things are and are not willing to learn who I have an issue with. And I've ran into some of those before too. I recall one teacher in the 6th grade, and she was a real witch with a capital B. They were having a meeting at the first of the year with all of my teachers to discuss my situation and things I might need. My mother was there, my counselor was there, and this teacher come out and said pretty much that he's retarded and he has no business being in my class. Well, one of my other teachers stepped up, who was a first-year teacher, by the way, and he took up for me. He said, "Look, there is nothing wrong with his brain. Just because he can't see well doesn't mean that he's lacking in the upper story. And if you would take 5 minutes to actually talk to him, then you would know that there was nothing wrong with his brain." And in my opinion, that teacher should have been fired. Not because of the way she treated me, but there was another student that she had who had epilepsy and was prone to having seizures, and this teacher was made aware of all of this. Well, one day the student had a seizure in class, and what does this idiot teacher do? She grabs the student and shakes her like she's having a fit. Because of that, the teacher should have been fired and possibly charges filed against her. That teacher is no longer with us today, and I know it's not proper to speak ill of the dead, but as far as I'm concerned, she's not missed in my corner of the world. And we'll just leave it at that. But I guess that's enough rambling for today. So we fixed a fluorescent desk lamp, all for the exception of replacing the bad tube, which that should be here, or replacing the missing tube, I should say. That should be here in a few days, and then hopefully this thing will be working to full capacity. And we showed that resistors can go down in value as well as go up, and we rambled on about my past and people who were know-it-alls and that sort of thing. Oh, tell you another story. There was another know-it-all in my electronics class. He was older than the rest of us by about 15 years, 12 to 15 years, and he was just your typical loudmouth that every Monday he would come in bragging about who he had slept with or how much alcohol or drugs he had consumed. Well, you know what they say about those who brag about who they've been sleeping with. They're probably not sleeping with anybody at all. They just want to come across like they are. And then whenever they would ask him to participate in some kind of lab assignment, he would often make cracks like, "Well, I don't know why I'm having to do this shit. I was an industrial mechanic for 13 years. I shouldn't have to do this shit." And then whenever he would get right down to it, he would prove that he really didn't know how to do it anyway. I know one time we were sitting out at the break table and he was asking me about a blind girl on the main campus who I knew was seeing somebody, but he asked me about hooking him up with her. Now, I would not have done so even had I known she was available, because I know that the only reason he wanted her was to, let's see, how do I say this nicely? Get in her pants. And I just wasn't going to do that. And then somebody else at the break table made some smart comment. Well, all these girls wants money. Since she's blind, you can just take some pieces of paper and cut it up to the size of dollar bills and let her feel that. She won't know the difference. Once she thinks she got money, she'll forget about that other guy and jump all over you. Well, then I ended up telling the other guy off for opening his ignorant big mouth. But as they say, it takes all kind. But alright, that's enough rambling for this episode. I hope you got something out of all this, and more to come later. Well, the lamps came in, and I've already installed one. Well, I don't know what that was all about. I was in the process of recording and it just went away and flashed up on the screen that the memory card was slow. Whatever was going on there. But anyway, our bulb showed up today and I've already installed one of them and it works great. The only thing is we didn't get Kenrad bulbs. We got Westinghouse bulbs, which I really don't care one way or another, just so they work. But these are older because, as you can tell, these have the black. And here's the labeling on the bulb: 15 watt F15 T8 cool white, and the glorious letters USA. I assume this is a date code. We have 3 dots to the left of USA and then 2 dots to the right. I haven't found anything to tell us how to decipher those yet on this particular lamp, but I suspect the 3 dots mean March and then the 2 dots mean 2. So seeing as how this has Bakelite end caps, this bulb is probably from 52, but I could be way off base. Anybody knows and feels free to correct me, then chime in. But here's a look at the packaging that they came in. I'm surprised this doesn't have the "you can be sure if it's Westinghouse" wording on the packaging, but I'm not seeing that anywhere. But so we ordered 6 bulbs, have 1 in use, have 5 extras for spares, so we ought to be set for 15 T8 cool white tubes in case they ever stop making fluorescent versions. And it looks like they're probably well on their way to doing that. So I will turn it off and then we'll let you look under there. There are the 2 bulbs, and now I'll turn it on and let you see it start up, and then that ought to take care of this video. So there you go. And on the subject of ballast hum, you might can hear a little bit of hum there among startup. That's because during startup there's more current draw, and the ballast is going to hum louder when there's more current being drawn, so that's the reason for that. But still, it's not an objectionable hum, and in normal operation, like I've already said, you really can't hear it anyway. So our desk lamp is fixed. If taken care of, it should probably be good for another 70 plus years. Well, I looked under there and I noticed our Sylvania bulb wasn't lit. So I turned it off and restarted it, and it lit up. Probably the reason for that was that newer bulb probably starts a little quicker than the old Sylvania, and I released the switch too quickly. So I'll have to remember that in the future. Well, it looks like I was way off on the date guesstimate of these bulbs. I've done some looking online, and I can't find any type of date code chart for these bulbs, but I found somebody on a vintage lighting forum who showed a Westinghouse bulb just like this one in the same kind of packaging as this one, except theirs had different dot markings for the date code, and somebody told them that theirs was made in 1978. So we can probably say this one was probably made late 70s, early 80s. So this bulb's at least 40 to 45 years old. But we're not going to get hung up about it being a lot newer than the lamp. It does have USA on it, and that's the main thing. I really don't want to see China. And these bulbs contain titanium, which from what I'm reading is to help prevent the ends from turning black. And these bulbs also, from what I'm reading, have a service life of 7,500 hours, so they should last a very long time over here. In fact, these bulbs I have will probably outlast me. In other words, I have enough bulbs here to outlast my time on this earth, most likely. But anyway, there you go. If any of you know how to decipher these date code dots, I'd be most appreciative. It looks like we have 4 dots under the 15 watt designation, and then 3 dots to the left of USA, and then 2 dots to the right of USA. So if anybody knows how to decipher that, then let me know and we can nail down exactly when this bulb was made. Here's what I found on the internet regarding the date codes of these Sylvania bulbs, and this here, the hyphen and 3 dots stands for April, and then the 3 dots on the other side of the logo could mean 1953, 63, or 73. But then they mentioned down here that the aluminum caps were introduced around 1955. But someone on one of the Facebook groups is telling me that my Sylvania bulbs were made in April of 63, and the Westinghouse bulb was made in January of 76, I believe they said. So who knows? Who knows? This lamp could be either from 1953 or 1963. So, and I don't claim to be an expert on fluorescent lamp fixtures. I could easily start collecting them, but I don't need to add any more collecting interest. I already have too much stuff as it is with the old radios and phonographs and televisions. I don't need to be adding fluorescent fixtures to the list, but that's not to say if I run across one somewhere for a good price, I might pick it up. And on that note, and I promise we'll end this time because the battery's about to die, I've got a lamp here that my dad made for me back in 1984 from wood out of the old barn that was on the family home place. And those barns no longer exist, by the way. And the fixture he used was one of those, I think it was called a bright stick. They were available in the early to mid 80s. As best I recall, they were basically a sealed unit fluorescent fixture that you could not replace the tube in it. When it died, you just replaced the whole fixture. Well, that fixture lasted for years and died, and I'd like to find something vintage to put back in its place. Again, I don't want to put some Chinesium LED crap in there if I can help it. Oh, and on that note, somebody on that same Facebook group was telling me that you worrying about Chinesium LED tubes is the least of your worries. As old as that lamp is, the ballast contained PCB. No, I don't think that's quite correct, because the ballast used in these little smaller lamps are basically just a choke. However, the ballast used in the older, larger lamps, a lot of those contain PCB, but I don't believe that's a concern with these little small GE ballast that are in this little desk lamp. So that's about all I've got. I'll now post pictures of the two bulbs at the end of the video, and you can peruse the pictures and you can tell me what you think as far as the date codes on them.
Alright, we're going to have to go back to the old camera to end this. I keep finding stuff to talk about. Through the power of high resolution photography and magnification, the wiring inside of the lamp says Victor Electric, and then it has the number 13563. Now normally that would be an EIA code plus a date code, 135 the EIA code, and 63 being the year. Well, that all checks out with what the gentleman told me about the Sylvania fluorescent bulb being from 63, but when I look up the EIA numbers on the 63 and 64, as far as that goes, as far back to 55 for 135, that crosses to Chicago Condenser Corporation, and I don't find any manufacturer for Victor Electric, so I don't know what the deal is with that. But it's starting to look more and more like this lamp might be from 63. And the GE ballast, I can't find anything that looks like a date code on them, so who knows.